Good evening. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. Today's January 21st, 2025. Karen, can you please call the roll?
Sure. We have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhines on Zoom, Lori Connolly, Elizabeth Dillon, Jay Fundling, Peter Mon, Julia Maxwell, Aman Nagasi on Zoom, and Ronald Sia on Zoom. So you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. So let's get started. Members of the committee, the February special town meeting is bearing down on us. This week, just in terms of scheduling this week, we're going to be meeting tomorrow and Thursday. Tomorrow, we're going to be speaking to town council concerning liquor licenses, town liability issues. On Thursday, we're going to be having the schools come in to discuss their 3 articles, including Cunningham School. Again, the addition to the member of the school committee.
Just keep going. I'm good to go.
Addition to member of the school building committee, and also the appropriation for the Mass School Building Project. So I expect votes, kind of like to line this up for maybe voting on the school project on Thursday, maybe addressing the liquor license and other liquor issues with the town tomorrow, and maybe get some votes in on some of our more, some of what I would suggest some of the easier articles that we have. I have gotten some signals from the select board, the town administrator, that there could be a couple more articles coming our way. I know you've seen the planning board. We've discussed that. We expect to see that in February. I think there is still the possibility of another zoning bylaw and potentially maybe a citizen's petition. I don't know. But the citizen's petition is something I think we're, always keep an eye out for no matter what meeting, because they do come up at least once a year. So that's just in terms of future scheduling for this week. I think we can get through basically all the articles as written. If we have to go longer, if the discussions are extended, so be it. But I think we're going to be meeting up right through to the February town meeting date. So got a lot of work to do. So I'd just like to kick the meeting off. I'd like to maybe just start a discussion about an appropriation from the PEG Access Enterprise Fund. And that would be in the new draft warrant. It is right after the moderator's comments, or where the moderator's comments would be. So it's to see if the town will vote to appropriate $60,000 from the PEG Access Enterprise Fund to MPEG Access, Inc. for the purposes of equipping the meeting room at the former fire headquarters building to support public, educational, and governmental access, cable television services, and to act on anything related thereto. So that's the first article. I'd like to open the discussion out to any members here in person or on Zoom. Liz?
No. No. My understanding is that this money comes from a fund that's already kind of allocated in the town budget. So it can't really be used for anything other than specific purposes, such as this one. I think that the comments that we had from our friends at Milton Access made a lot of sense to me in terms of kind of amortizing over time and how long this project would sort of see us through. And so I thought it made sense from an overall budgetary standpoint. I think we can do this without having to be concerned about where the money is coming from, because it's already exists and has been apportioned to this a little bit broader than this, but specific purpose. It can't be used for other things. So.
Anyone else like to weigh in on the new building and the PEG access?
So I reached out to Nick because I thought the same thing that Liz just described, that the money's already there. Let's just do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
But he also had made a comment about the fact that the funds coming in from Comcast and RCN are declining.
Mhm.
And what used to be, 50,000, 60,000 is down to 38,000. So that will continue to decline. So that was a concern for me. He did, and I said, we can use the room. Can we not use the fire headquarters room today? He said we could. The issue is it can't be televised. So if we wanted to meet there, we couldn't because we're not able to be televised. And I said, well, what's up with the Blute room? Can we no longer use the Blute room, or is that going offline? He said it could possibly be repurposed. So there are some reasons why we would still want to do it. The Comcast contract is not up for renegotiation until 29. So there's some time. This enterprise fund is what does fund, I believe, MATV. So it will ultimately become a cost to the town. Again, in my, oh my gosh, we have a $10.5 million deficit that we're looking at. Do we want to spend the money if we do have access to the Blute room when we have all these other issues that are just going to get worse depending upon whether or not the override passes? There's just a lot of projects in town. And should we save the money because at some point it's going to run out? But that could be 10 years, 15 years. I don't know. So I'm still a little.
No, I appreciate it. Anyone else?
That 60,000 was primarily for equipment. The room hasn't been built out to this point. So it's really mostly equipment installation.
Yeah.
And to allow for it to be televised.
Right.
And it is, and there is money. It's not like it's hitting the budget. But at some point in time, we will run out of that money in the fund. The enterprise fund for PEG access will run out of money because we won't have the cable companies funding it any longer. Is the expectation.
Oh, Liz?
Yeah, no, I totally see what you're saying, Lori. I think that for me, the fact that they're looking to spend 60,000 out of the 420,000 that's in there, and when we spoke to Mr. Milano, that $60,000 took us 2 years to earn, and then the project would have a 10 to 15 year lifespan. So I think that
That's correct.
investing the money now, where I get what you're saying, that like eventually we're going to run out. But I think we'll be able to make back the money in the next couple years, even with that diminishment, than we would then spend. So I don't think it's another thing that we're going to spend in the next 5 years, since the project will last 10 to 15. I think we'll more than make the money back up, even with the diminishment over time of people like me who, no offense to cable, have given up on their cable altogether and only do streaming. So
Right.
I do.
And that's where it's going, right?
Yeah.
So
Can I ask a question, Lori? Maybe Jay, I don't know, or anyone else. Was I sent out a table about the PEG access and just the revenue streams. There was, just recall, I think it was a couple of town meetings ago, there was an amount removed, right? Was that to fund the broadband?
broadband for the
Okay.
INET, for the
For
institutional
the INET. So,
connecting
and
the
then
town building.
we saw a drop, right, from 750 to 400 or so. I'm very, just in terms of a comment about this project, I think it's they've done so much work and they've spent a lot of money. It's let's see it through, right, and make it a really nice place, and let's not stop. And I'm very happy. I like how they restored a historical building, and they did a good job. I mean, it looks really nice. But to Lori's point too, I just think it's good for the town to know where this money comes from, what it's being used for, and just be mindful, I think, of that at a certain point it may end, and then we have to fund it. And I don't think it would be for a while, but I think it's important that the town knows that this really isn't a huge slush fund to draw from all the time. But I certainly think that the 60,000 is an appropriate amount. I think to really kind of see this thing through. That's just my 2 cents.
And my understanding is there's a the need for more meeting space in town. So to me, this is a means to an end to take advantage of the construction and the new space we have, and to allow more access to more meetings for the public to be televised. I, as a working parent, find that very helpful. And so to me, the more meetings that can be televised, the better. So I think it's a win all around for a relatively low budget line item.
Yeah, I mean, 60,000 is a lot. If another department would say, we could do a lot with that. So it's not a small money amount for the town, but I think it's very money well spent in this circumstance.
I just add to that, that's probably not gonna get cheaper if we wait a year or two.
No, it won't. And that's another excellent point. That
Absolutely.
I'm still dealing in $1998 from when I went to college.
Yeah.
But no, that's an excellent point. I appreciate it.
Brian.
Oh, Brian?
Hi, sorry I'm delayed on this. I just had a question on this project. I'm in favor of doing it, but it seemed like $60,000 was a lot of money to spend to wire and put cameras into a room. Is Comcast the only, do we have to only go through them to do this? Could we get another quote?
I don't know if Comcast is gonna wire it. I don't know who actually does that.
No, we didn't ask about the contracting, Brian, and who would be the ones who would complete the project.
Yeah, I didn't think of it until after. It just doesn't seem like kind of a lot just to do wiring and stuff, but that's my only 2 cents. But I think the project, I'm in favor of it. But
Anybody have an idea? Share.
I think it's an old building. If they've already done renovation. Maybe they have already pre-wired or potentially wired or left channels or other wires that they might be able to run. If not, then I could see 60,000 being a good number.
Yeah, I can only, and just to follow up, I can only speak to personal, like professionally, or we've engaged in tech upgrades, my work, and it is not cheap. It is sometimes shocking how much it costs, but in terms of this amount for this project, I can't speak specifically to it. Jay?
Yeah, as far as that goes, short of having our friends in the other room come speak to us, which maybe they want to, it's like every other line item in the budget that we have to sort of trust that it's being spent appropriately. We have, multiple layers in town hall looking at how our money is spent, and I'm fine with trusting that it's being spent appropriately. If if they're asking for 60,000 and ends up costing 40,000, I assume that's what they'll end up spending. And I guess for the bigger picture, I feel like we're talking about 2 questions here. One is, should we spend $60,000 from this fund to upgrade the room? And I agree, it's not play money, it's not monopoly money, it's real money. And then there's the question of, is this fund going to dwindle eventually or not? I'm looking at what you sent us, and I'm a little bit confused by it, because it's saying, we've got 5,000 cable subscribers in town, 50 cents each gives us $2,500. I don't know if that's per month. Even if that's per month, that's $30,000. And when I look at last year's warrant said a $500,000 appropriation from the PEG Access Enterprise Fund. We've got, to be honest, I'm a little embarrassed because I'm a 3rd-year warrant committee member, and I've never looked at what is the PEG Access Enterprise Fund? How much is going in? How much is going out? Do we have a certain number of full-time employees? Do we have a certain number of part-time employees? I don't know. So maybe these are all good things to dig into as part of the annual warrant. Because I'm embarrassed. I don't know that.
No, Jay, those are all great questions that I think when I left here the other night, I was thinking about that, right? Like how many,
how many employees are there? Like what?
Yeah, if the cable bills are providing $30,000 a year, but spending $500,000, that's not even the right order of magnitude.
Right.
Something's not lining up there.
Okay. I think that would be a good topic to bring up, Jay. Please remind
The
me.
General Government Committee is on the case.
Well, Jay, I appreciate it, and I think it is something good to think about. And I know, looking at the numbers, the 50 per, I had questions about that myself, about how that worked out. But
Go Government Study Committee. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add, or just in terms of the room renovation, the fire station, the appropriation? No hands?
Steve Ryan's
Steve Rhines.
Hey, how are you guys? Sorry I couldn't be there tonight traveling. Jay, don't feel bad. I agree with you. I'm looking at this too, and there's a lot of information there, but I do have questions because I thought I recalled some of these monies for PEG getting shifted for different things before. So I've got questions for that. I am interested to understand more about what they're doing for that room. I think it's important to have these spaces built out, especially since we've invested the monies to renovate that. So I'm just curious to see what's going to go in there. Yeah, I mean, that's just a general comment.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments, questions, concerns regarding PEG appropriation? Okay, I don't see any other hands raised or to make a comment or have any questions. Have we exhausted the topic? Because if we have, I'd be curious if anyone had a motion.
Well, I had another question. Sorry.
Sure.
My only thing would be, do we have a sense where, and I think the answer is no, but do we have a sense of where we expect the cable subscribers to level off? So I assume someone will, maybe not always and forever, but will subscribe to cable even when most people stop. So is there a point at which it will kind of level off and then we will still have whatever that money is? Because if I were just, a town meeting member and not in the warrant committee, my first question would have been, have you done some modeling to see how much money is going to be left over the course of, sort of what Lori was talking about? And then where is the anticipation in terms of people subscribing and where does that sort of access meet? So there is going to be a point, and I am, now that Lori mentions it, I am curious where we see ourselves sort of. Is it going to be 10 years, 20 years, 30? I know nobody can predict the future with streaming and all that, but there has to be a point where it will level off, and those are the people that are firmly committed to cable, and we don't really anticipate it to drop below that, and then we can see sort of what amount of money that we're working with. And I don't know that we can do that today, but I agree we're probably not going to have $420,000 in there forever.
I think what's going to happen, looking into the future and moving to streaming, you still need an internet. And that's being provided by the same people who are providing right now your cable. So as people drop off and go to streaming, two things are probably going to happen. Internet service prices are going to go up. I know FiOS is coming in, and I've heard mixed results, but I think it's going to be a long process. And then for the businesses, aren't just going to suddenly go, gee, everybody's not using our service anymore. For those who are continuing to use it and will be there forever, as you say, $150 or $200 a month can become $300 a month and $400 a month. And if you just are addicted to cable, you're going to pay more for it. And I'm hopefully, on the basis of the contract, which I have not seen with the town, if we're getting a percentage of the revenue that's coming, as opposed to who's watching HBO, then there should be a balancing of revenue. I don't see the revenue going to zero.
Mhm.
It's going to fall off potentially a little bit, but then prices will go up. And if we're on a percentage basis, I would imagine that we do just as well.
Didn't Nick say it was like that $5 fee you pay?
Yeah.
On the cable bill, it's like whatever it was, it's like $4.95 or $5. That is the money that we're getting.
Hmm.
So it's like a flat, again, it might be the contract with Comcast, but that's the fee. And he also mentioned the FCC will be involved in, what's going on. So there are many factors involved. And I was just curious about it. But to your point, back to the 60,000 for the equipment, I think we have the money. It's not affecting the operating budget, and we should build out the space so it can be fully functional. So,
Jay, as you're looking into this, it would be great to get a look at the contract that we have with the providers. And I think if it's the $5 fee, if it's $5 regardless of how much you're paying, and that's the community charge. If you're a subscriber, so it's not like a percentage of your bill.
Right.
It's just basically if you're a subscriber.
Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead, Ron.
Ron?
Hi. My only comment was, I think we could do economic analysis on this. For me, I don't know if it would be material, because how this fund gets replenished over a 10-year period, I just don't know. I mean, we're trying to make a decision on updating one room. Unless I could see what the opportunity, the opportunity cost of doing, like, what were the other alternatives? And I don't think we've been presented with other options, that are maybe more needy. I think we're just deciding this one single space. Maybe as a longer term project, we could do the economic analysis, or we can have someone do it. It just costs time and money. But if we can get like a list of all the different projects and all the different potential projects, then we can rank order them. But I just don't think we have that kind of information today, and we need to take a vote on this. So I would just caution not to overanalyze, because I don't think we have those resources.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I want to violate what our colleague just said. I want to overanalyze it, but just briefly.
Overanalyze, Jay. Do it.
Just thinking that the way this, 10 years ago, there were 7,200 subscribers. That's probably about the number of households. That's probably everybody was paying 50 cents a month, $5 a month. I'm not sure. My point is, this money was always coming out of the pockets of the people who live in Milton. And I can't predict the future. Maybe it'll come out of the pockets of the people who live in Milton through their property taxes instead of their cable bill. I guess I jumped right to the punchline there. So, if it starts dwindling and we have to pay for it through the general revenue, it's not like, it used to be free magic money and now we have to pay for it. It's, But I do agree with what our colleague just said. And I think there's the big picture and the small picture. And on the small picture, I think I'm ready to vote.
Yeah. Excellent points. Liz?
Just to what you said earlier, Tom, I think that this particular town meeting, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion of the overall budget, sort of to Allison's point of the last meeting. And I think that depending on how we vote, I really think that we need to spell out in the comments sort of where the money is coming from, so that people can see sort of what we talked about, which is this is a specific fund used for specific purposes that's using a small percentage of it. Because with the potential override and all of that, I think there's going to be a lot of questions about exactly what we're spending money on for what. And so just being kind of cognizant of that discussion, I think it will be helpful for town meeting members to see, that we took all of that into account and have had really thoughtful discussions about those issues.
Mm-hmm. And, those should be reflected in the comment, not just the discussion, but, the origin of the article. And, what's its purpose, you know, and then obviously, you know, educating town meeting, helping them have that discussion, you know, raising a point and giving them a little, you know, fodder so they can, you know, hopefully ask the questions and have a debate. But no, I agree. I think this year more than ever, you know. So if there aren't any more questions or comments, I'd hear a motion if somebody would like to make one. Maybe more senior member of our committee.
I'll make the next one.
Yeah, I'll move that we recommend that the town vote to appropriate $60,000 from the PEG Access Enterprise Fund to MPEG Access Inc. as is drafted in the document we got from Mr. Milano. I could read it word for word, but there are going to be more coming up, and so I want to set precedent of saying, look at the document.
Well, yeah, look at the document. So this is an unnumbered article. It's in our draft warrant to see if the town will appropriate a motion that Jay just made. It's yet to be seconded. To appropriate $60,000 from the PEG Access Enterprise Fund for the purposes of equipping the meeting room in the former fire headquarters building to support public educational, governmental access, cable television services, and to act on anything relating thereto. Is there a second to Jay's motion?
Second.
Julia?
Mhm.
Second. Okay. Put it out to a vote. Karen?
Okay. Steve Rhines,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes. Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Allison has declined to be a panelist. I just invited her again, so I'm not sure. Allison? No, she's still an attendee. Julia?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Aman?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
The motion carries.
It's unanimous. Congratulations, Warrant Committee. The first official act of this fiscal year. Isn't it exciting? Thank you all. I appreciate it. So, one down. So given what I said in the beginning of the meeting, right now I'd like to have a discussion about lead service line in the town. And the conversations we had with Ms. Fernandez the other day and some of the additional information that was sent to you a little bit late, but nonetheless sent just regarding that project. And remember, one was removed. So this is to see what sum of money the town will vote to appropriate and to provide capital needs for the town's water system, including costs incidental and related thereto, and to authorize the select board on behalf of the town to apply for and use federal, state, MWRA, or other funds for this purpose, to see how much appropriation shall be raised, whether by borrowing under applicable provisions of law or otherwise, and to act on anything related thereto. This is the appropriation of $1.7 million for the purpose of financing the town's lead service line, investigations and replacements, and all incidental costs. To meet that appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow $1.7 million under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 8 of the general laws, and also to issue bonds, et cetera, and any foregoing appropriations from the MWRA. So that is the article I'd like to discuss, $1.7 million appropriation to address our lead pipes in the town. This is obviously, there are going to be some federal requirements in the future regarding this work, and the town is looking to get ahead of it. So anybody like to comment on our lead pipe work? Liz, thank you.
Well, I have a question about the rounding. So we have this nice budget that's all spelled out, and it has a contingency of 10%. And then that amounts to close to a little over 1.66, and then we round it up to 1.7. And if anybody wanted to just hand me $35,000, I would gladly take it. But is it common that we have to have a rounded number? Because given the money issues that we're all, sort of staring down at in the town, save the 35,000. I mean, I know it's appropriating, so they don't necessarily need to spend it, but I feel like a goldfish in a bowl, the larger it is, the bigger you become, And so I would say maybe we don't have to be so exact, 1.66375, but closer to 1.66 without the rounding up, because there's already a contingency built in.
Anyone like to speak to that? Jay?
Yeah, we're not supposed to touch the microphones, but I can't help it. I guess I'd like to say I share your feeling for a lot of the budget line items. I think a lot of the budget line items, they should have a little cushion. I think they have a little more cushion than they need to. I'm less concerned about this one because it's going to be borrowing. If it hit the annual operating budget, I think there are a lot of things in the annual operating budget that we're tight, and yet we still have padding on line item after line item. But this is not going to hit. We're going to be borrowed. We're going to issue bonds. That's not even going to hit this year's budget. We'll know what we're going to spend at some point in the future, and then they'll say, okay, and those bonds will be, 20-year bonds at this interest rate, and they'll put an estimate in the debt servicing line item, but not this year. So what I'm saying is I'm a little more okay with there being padding in something we're going to borrow, because that's not going to hit the budget until we have a little better idea of how much we're going to borrow. So all that is to say, I hear what you're saying. I'm a little more okay with this because it's a debt-funded item. And I hope I made sense as to why I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I concur.
And this is mandated for over a 10-year period.
Essentially, yes.
So
Lori, you had a question. I'm not looking to put you on the spot, but you had a question just about the breakdown.
Oh, I was trying to get to the 1.7. Remember when we took the numbers and then she added in, she did basically what I was trying to do, but had design, permitting, and bidding support, the police details. She had a number of other components that are related to it. So, which made sense because I couldn't get to the 1.7 with the hard numbers that she gave us.
So it was the incidental costs that she built in.
It's just all the other pieces that we will encounter when we do the project.
Okay.
Brian?
Yeah, my question is, it's 1.663. Since we get 25% back, are we really appropriating the 1.7 or 75% of that? Since it's a 25% grant.
That is correct. I wonder if we have to appropriate the total amount because we don't have the grant award. But I don't know.
That was my understanding, for what it's worth, that we had to appropriate the full amount and then we get the
Get the money
25 back, and then that would
Right.
go
So-
where the extra money goes.
Well, but then again, back to Jay's point,
Mm-hmm.
when we go to borrow, we're only borrowing what we need.
Does that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But Liz, I approve I like the
Well,
fine. I mean, it's
No, Jay's explanation is very helpful. I am not ignorant of the fact that even if we borrow it, it has to be paid back somehow, some way, someday. However, it is helpful, that information, and Brian's point about the fact that it will actually be less than that because we will be getting a grant. And I believe the loan was, we know the interest on that, so like interest free for
It's interest-free.
years. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's good too.
Has anyone else checked this math and had it not add up?
Is that in the larger spreadsheet?
Yeah, the one that Marina sent through. No, sorry, the email that you
Oh.
sent us from Marina that she originally sent on Friday the 17th. I'm just putting it in a spreadsheet and trying to make sure that I understand it, and I am not getting the same numbers. So like the subtotal that she has listed of 1,331,000 does not at first I thought, oh well, maybe she's not adding in the 85,000 for design, permitting, and bidding support. But even then I get 1,301,500. If I do add in the 85,000, I get 1,398,500. So then regardless, that throws off the contingency 10% number, and then I'm unclear what the 15% for the construction services is. 15% of what exactly? So I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if other people had looked at this and not quite gotten the same numbers. I see
Okay.
Lori with her calculator.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Okay.
So it's the 67,500 she's not including. That's the LSL replacement from program.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why, but that's how it shakes out.
Well, maybe is that the portion that is reimbursable?
From program, maybe that is the grant program.
Yeah.
So she's not, so maybe she's deducting that already. So,
That's 28% of the $234,000.
Okay, so that's like roughly 25.
Oh, okay. Yep, so that makes
Okay.
more sense. Okay. Okay, so then the 15% is of the subtotal?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jay.
And so the 17 or 1663 is really what we're going to be paying, not
Okay.
with the grant.
Right.
Yeah.
With the 25% already
yeah.
removed.
it's not that minus the 25%. It's that,
Right.
and we'll get a zero as well. Which fits with the recommended article, because the recommended article says borrow 1.7 million, and in addition to the foregoing appropriation, may accept grants or gifts from MWRA. So I was just wondering about that wording. So we spend $1.7 million, and in addition to that, we accept gifts from MWRA.
Yeah, and if you add back in the 67,500, then you're at 1.731. So I can see the rounding up to 1,700.
What was that final number?
If you add back in the 67,500 to the total, you're at 1,731,250.
Okay.
So I can see why they rounded up to the 1.7.
Thank you. Is everyone satisfied with the numbers? No, I appreciate that, Julia, very much.
Yeah.
I'm more comfortable with the 1.7.
Okay. Just when you thought you had to figure it out, right? Right. I like the other night. I'm like, oh,
Trust but verify.
I feel so good about this. But I appreciate you speaking up very much. Anybody have anything else they'd like to speak to this? This is a mandatory program.
Right.
And
And it's lead.
And it's
So we
lead,
wanted to
so-
hear that.
Right.
you know, Peter, you have anything more?
Yeah, I think the only issue is the unknown. You know, we started with a bigger number and then suddenly, 3 months later, it's 45% of that. And you really wonder how much of the unknowns are really in fact lead. And I just wish there was a way that you wouldn't have to drill as many test holes, et cetera, to figure that out. I'm old enough to remember meter readers coming to check my water. Would have been nice to say, by the way, just check and see if
Exactly.
the pipes coming in are copper, or, not lead. But I'm sure that the process is the process. It's the money we have to spend to do the right thing.
I remember the meter readers when I was a kid coming with the flashlight.
Got it.
My mom used to let me show them where it was. I was all excited.
Yeah.
You're not that old. But no, I'm sure it's something that a lot of people don't think about in town either. It's something that though you turn on the spigot, the water comes out. But the numbers look square on this. I appreciate Ms. Fernandez and her work and her team digging through the old books to try to figure this out. I don't have any questions or concerns about this beyond what was discussed. Anybody? Any motion?
Motion to vote on article unnumbered as of yet, but the second one in the draft
Okay.
warrant so far. Gotta scroll to it. The wrong one. It's not the second one.
Thank you.
To appropriate $1.7 million for the purpose of financing the town's lead service line investigations and replacements, including costs incidental and related thereto. Do I need to read the whole?
No? Okay, good. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Peter. Okay, open it up for a vote. Thank you, Karen.
Steve,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Julia,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Aman,
Yes. Yes.
Ron.
Yes.
Motion carries. Oh, Tom, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Sorry.
unanimous.
Karen, I'm here also. Sorry. It's Andrew.
Oh,
Oh,
Andrew
Andrew.
joined us. I'm sorry, Andrew.
Yes.
Okay, still unanimous.
Okay, great. Okay, moving right along. I think we should talk about senior means tested tax exemptions. How do you feel about that?
Well, I have a question about that.
Sure.
So in the draft warrant that we got, those two things that I brought up in D are highlighted, and then the thing about excessive assets that a lot of other people brought up are highlighted. So who highlighted that, and what's the status?
That would be the town administrator who for us highlighted those things.
Thank you to him.
And these are things that have been pointed out.
Yep.
These are things that have been pointed out for us, but if there's that's really kind of my understanding generally of
Well,
why those were highlighted.
From a procedural standpoint, if it turned out to be that our recommendation was to modify that, or that we would vote no because that should be modified by the select board, or how would we go about doing that in this case? Because he said, should we wish that the select board make that change, et cetera, he could take that back to him. Them, I mean. Because I just don't think that we got clarity about those 3 points yet, so.
Well, these are things that we can discuss with Mr. Milano. The select board is meeting and the changes would come from them. We can make recommendations to town meeting where they can address it on the floor. If they wanted to, we suggest new or additional language. But, this is the warrant as we receive it. So it would either be a change from the select board's perspective, or we would recommend to town meeting that the town meeting make a change to
Well,
this.
procedurally, how do you do that? You vote no? You vote that you would vote yes if
We
it
would-
were amended?
We would vote, it would be kind of like a yes/no vote. We approve the spirit of the article,
Uh-huh.
but we would recommend that town meeting make the following changes. And we would highlight those changes
In the comment.
in the comment.
But
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you again. So here, as we're about to vote, how would you indicate that if that were your
I
vote?
put it in the comment.
No, but when you say yes or no right now,
She's saying
See
as
what
an
I'm saying?
individual.
as an individual person, how
Right
would you
now.
express
Oh,
that?
you would say no.
Oh, you would say no. Okay.
Because these are kind of conditions precedent on qualifying
fair
for the thing. So like, I would think the vote would be no.
Fair. Yeah. Jay.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding you or if there may be a different way to go about this. I mean, I've seen in the past, not since I've been on the warrant committee, but there have been, proposed articles written in the not bold text. And then the warrant committee's recommendation in the bold text, slightly different.
Mhm.
So one thing we could do, if you're okay with this, Mr. Chair, is we could say, because what we vote on is the bold text.
Mhm.
And we could say, I make a motion to recommend to town meeting, and we read off this word for word, or we take it as written, but say, and change this word to that word, and change this word to that word. So we could have a warrant committee recommendation, which is different than what's proposed by the select board. Now, between now and town meeting, if we're, at odds with the select board, that's a recipe for anarchy. So hopefully they get on board with us. But since the select board isn't meeting until the 28th, which is a week from now, and we want to hammer things out before then if possible, if you agree, Mr. Chair, I think it would be appropriate within the rules that we run these meetings to, I don't know if it'd be two ways they could go. One person could make the motion and the motion could just be different. That might be the easiest. A person could make a motion for exactly this word for word, and then someone else could make an amendment, and we could vote on that amendment. I think if you were saying that our recommendation should be the town vote no, I think we have other options.
Oh,
And I don't know if that's what you're saying, or if
I didn't articulate it as well, but are we ready to? We can discuss this. So would we be ready to vote on this evening?
Well, I just don't understand how I'm supposed to vote, given my confusion, is the only thing.
Okay.
Tom, I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm just curious about the language, and I'm sure there is I'm sure it makes sense to somebody else that's been deeply involved in it. But why is it the language qualified as one or more natural persons? And meaning, can it be more than two? By the way that the way I read it, it could be two or more. Could be more than two people that jointly own the property. And in section 2, paragraph A, is it clear that both parties or every party has to have received a circuit breaker income tax credit?
Can anyone answer that question?
No, I think we need to talk
My
about-
understanding, I'll jump in. My understanding is they have to, this is a state law, the circuit breaker,
Mhm.
and they have to qualify for that. And that's what that is referencing. So if they get the circuit breaker, then they can get this. And we're going to
Yes.
meet, we're going to match or semi.
That I understand, but the way the paragraph is worded, both paragraph A and B is worded, it could mean that the qualifying parcel is owned by more than two people. And the bigger concern that I have, and that question is more of a question mark. The bigger concern I have is the way Section 2A is worded. It's not clear to me that if one party, one owner, let's say Brian and I own the property together, we're obviously not married or domestic partners, but one of us qualifies for the circuit breaker income tax credit and the other does not. It's not clear to me the way that it's disqualifying.
Yeah, I think the intent is that it would be married couple that owns a house. But you're right. I mean, it could be like three siblings that own a house. But if they all qualify, I guess what happens if two of them qualify but one doesn't?
Well, that's the point. So if
Yeah.
one owns it, the one that doesn't happens to have $3 million a year of income, then I don't think this is intended to cover that situation. And one might argue that, yes, it could be corrected by the Board of Assessors who may deny an application, but that puts a burden on them to review each and every single application with a fine-tooth comb. So I'm new to the process, and I just want to make sure how clear we need to be in the language in order to avoid inadvertently creating loopholes that were never intended.
Good point, I think.
I think it's a good question. We do have multiple lawyers on this warrant committee. I happen to be a lawyer too, but I think we can all interpret things differently. The way I would read this is the word is or. So it would be occupied by one natural person who blah, 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 or more than one natural person who blah, blah, blah. So if you have one person and it's a group of three, let's say, I think as long as at least one person qualifies or has applied and received the circuit breaker income tax credit, I think they would meet the requirements of this language because you have or language here. If it said you can have one who meets this requirement or more, and each of the people in the more group, each of them has to qualify, then that's different. But I think we'd be reading more into the language than is really here. That is my non-legal opinion.
By that
Thank you, Ron.
logic, then it's not really intended to cover that situation. Let's say there are three parties, one of which received a circuit breaker tax credit, and the other two siblings are particularly well off, then that's not the point of this amendment, right? What we're trying to do is make sure that people that have lived in their homes for at least 10 years can stay in their homes and not be priced out.
Well, can I just answer?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know that we know the exact intent, but there could be a situation where a parent and child jointly own a property, and the parent may qualify, but the child may not, I guess, because maybe the child's still working and they have income. I don't know that we would exclude them because the parent, in theory, has still been living in this town and paying taxes if they own real estate. So I don't know. I think we can each have different intents. We can each want something different. I don't know if we have agreed that should be excluded. I mean, I have my personal opinion of whether I should be included or not, but I don't know if we need to all agree that that's the intent of the law.
I think they have to meet the state qualification. And then there's first, at least one of them, the issue of one or two, I think could be then brought down to the Board of Assessors, who has the right of rejecting any application that comes through for excessive assets, which would include maybe, if, in the case we mentioned, somebody's qualified, somebody isn't because they're making too much money. There's a circuit breaker there for that. I don't know how many of those in Georgia. I think the majority of the situations would be, as the law has intended, to help elderly folks with whose income might be limited.
So my understanding, based on the way it's written, is that not everybody who owns and occupies it has to apply for and receive the circuit breaker, because just looking at the mass law, seems like to get the circuit breaker, you have to be 65 or older. And then our provision B says it could be single person 65 and older. That person would maybe be eligible for the circuit breaker, or jointly by one or more, so long as one is 65 or older, and then everybody else is 60. The people in between 60 and 64 wouldn't necessarily be eligible. So I
Recording
think
in
it's
progress.
Discrimination as to excess assets.
What?
And it's very arbitrary.
Hello?
It doesn't say what it is. Is it $1
Hello?
million, $2 million, $10 million,
I think so.
or 2 homes? But
oh, Brian, you're
I don't see that language in the state law when I looked at it. And I don't know, I think we should take it out. Because now you're making a question on something, and gonna come up with a lot of questions, and it could be trouble down the road, maybe 20 years from now, somebody will question it and it'll be all over the place. But I don't know why we would try to add like another qualifier on it. And I would just go with what the state does. And it's just, it makes it less complicated for this town also. That's my 2 cents. And I'd like to hear a discussion on it. And if you think so, maybe we can make that recommendation to take it out. But people think it should be left in, that's fine.
Mr. Chair, can I ask Brian to repeat the beginning of what he said? Brian, I missed the
Oh,
start of what he
sorry.
said. Can you?
Yeah, wireless isn't great here. Article G, it looks like it was inserted by the town of Milton. And I think it's going to create problems down the road. And I don't believe that's in the state law. So I would recommend taking it out.
Take one out. G.
Excessive assets.
Oh.
G as in girl.
It's in here.
Yeah. Mr. Chair,
Okay.
I would like to agree wholeheartedly with Brian. You took the words out of my mouth. I could elaborate, but for now, I'll just say I agree with you, Brian.
Okay,
I would like to see G removed.
thanks.
Elaborate.
Should I elaborate?
Yeah, elaborate, Jay. It's gonna
Yeah.
help. It's gonna help us.
I think I'll basically say what Brian said, but maybe with better wireless connectivity. So the state law, Section 6K of Chapter 62 of the General Laws, which I read for the first time during a warrant committee meeting last week, so I'm now an expert on it. It looks at people who are, over a certain age and under a certain financial level, and gives them, it's not about homeowners, it's about homeowners or renters, and it gives them a reduction in their income tax, I believe. So to my mind, if the Commonwealth of Massachusetts looks at people and says, if you meet A, B, and maybe C, then you get X amount off your income taxes. If that's good enough for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to give a knock off their income taxes, then for financial purposes, that's good enough for me to say the town of Milton will give you a discount on your property taxes too. As far as I'm concerned, that would be the starting point. We could start by just having an article that says, if you get that, you get reduced property taxes. But we're not saying that. We're saying extra things. We're saying also, well, you have to own the house because we're talking property tax. And we're saying also this thing we were just talking about, like if your roommate has to be older than 60 or whatever. And a couple other things. And then the thing about you have to own or live here for at least 10 consecutive years, we're adding that. So we're starting at a pretty good baseline, which is just what the state law is. And then we're adding things. But I don't think we need to really add the Board of Assessors. And I don't mean to make it sound like they'll be arbitrary or unfair in any way, but I don't think we need to have them looking at people's assets and decide if they're, no, the Commonwealth says you get a discount on your income tax, but we've decided you're too wealthy to get this discount here. So that's I would like to also agree with my colleague to strike G entirely.
And Liz?
Well, I wanted to go back to the point I was making before. So, my understanding, based on the way that it's written, is that not everybody who lives or owns a house has to be eligible for the circuit breaker. Because if they had to be, it wouldn't have paragraph B saying that everybody has to be 60 or older, because you have to be 65 or older to qualify for the circuit breaker. So I think Ron's point is well taken, that probably the way that it should be read, paragraph A, is that it's owned and occupied by one or more persons, and only one of those persons needs to qualify and receive the circuit breaker income tax. I think it's a little bit confusingly written, to Andrew's point. Then I also have some questions sort of to what, well, I agree with the point about excessive assets, because the excessive assets, I mean, if you look at the actual statute, it includes a real deep dive, as Jay was saying, into all your capital gains and whether you have, public assistance and all of this stuff. And so I don't know what an excessive asset would be separate and apart from what the Commonwealth looks into. So I think it goes to people's expectation that one would expect that they would be able to get this benefit. But I take the point that you could be a person who has a child or a sibling who's age 60 or older, who has multiple millions of dollars in a bank account, and you yourself are eligible for the circuit breaker, apply for it, receive it, and then you own this house partly with your very rich relative or friend or whatever. But you'd be getting the tax benefit, not necessarily them. So I guess it just depends on what the intent is.
So, can I follow up on that?
Sure.
Just a point of clarification. I think this article is different than the individual tax situation, because whether it's a single person or a couple taxes, the circuit breaker would be a true income test, because they would be assuming, most likely be sharing, most likely either one or separately being income tested, as opposed to three random people potentially owning a property. In this case, I think what the state does for tax purposes is different than limiting it strictly to a property tax situation. So I'm less concerned about G being in there, because in the event that there is somebody who's manipulating something and utilizing a loophole, Board of Assessors can take the risk that they deny the application and it gets litigated. But knowing that there are people who make a living of dealing with abatements professionally in order to sort of manipulate loopholes, I am concerned about the vague language in here, and that doesn't really specify who the owners are and whether it doesn't account for a situation where somebody, like you could have a parent that owns 1% of the property and somebody well off that owns 99% of the property, and as long as they're both over 60, and one person qualified for circuit breaker, then by the word of the law, or the way this is worded, they would qualify. And how many people are actually going to take advantage of that, I don't really know. But I mean, I think if you get a draft language, you could make it a little cleaner than this.
Liz.
And in addition to, further to that point, only one of the joint applicants has to be domiciled and own the real property in Milton. So you could have a situation where, well, I find that to be a little bit, actually, has to be owned and occupied by one or more natural persons. Then it says it has to be the domicile of the taxpayer. Then it says only one of the joint applicants has to be living there. Well, in any event, I think you could have a situation where the rich party only lives there like a portion of the year and doesn't really live there at all. And then you're benefiting an out of Milton person with this tax benefit because only one of them has to live there for the previous 10 years. You know, so if you have this rich 60-year-old child or whatever relative, and they own 99% of the property, and they've lived there, you know, 1 out of the past 10 years, the applicant could be their less well-off parent, also over 60, and own 1% of the property, and have lived in Milton, and both parties are getting the benefit, sort of further to Andrew's point. Which may not be really what we're intending, the select board is intending to do.
So I think C is a current requirement. The qualifying parcel is a domicile of the taxpayers. It doesn't say 5 years ago or 6 years. It just says that's today then.
Right, today.
And then D means they need to have lived at some residence in this town over 10 years. So if people moved, I think that's why you have two different clauses here. One's over 10 years, and then one is a current resident. That's how I read those
The rich person lives there today, but they haven't lived there for the past 10 years. Their more elderly parent who owns 1% of the property has lived there the whole time, but the rich child who owns 99% is getting the tax benefit too, and they've only lived in Milton a brief amount of time. Now that we're telling everybody how to dodge through the loopholes of this.
Get the loopholes.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I guess if you want to have your elderly, less well-off parent move in and buy 1%
There's your plan.
of your property.
I mean, it's pretty limited the number of the number of people that could sort of game this, but it can be gamed nonetheless. So if people aren't too concerned about it, I won't be either. But I just think if you get a draft an article that can be more precise to eliminate those situations.
To put a dollar value on it, again, I'm just glancing at the law right now. It looks like the Commonwealth gives you up to $1,500, and the what the town will give you, it says will be determined by the select board. But does anyone recall? Did Mr. Milano say it'd be half or all of, like between 50 and 100% of what the state would give? Yeah. So we're talking at most $1,500. So one of our colleagues, and I apologize, I forget who, said, there are people out there who sell their services to tell you how to get more out of the tax code. I don't know how much you're going to pay an advisor to save $1,500 on your taxes. You don't get out of bed for that amount. So,
Good point.
yeah, I keep thinking we're talking about an edge case and how many of those are there,
Yeah.
but not zero. I mean, you're right. A 60-year-old child and a 85-year-old parent could qualify for this. You're right. And yeah,
That's the only reason I like G. I mean, it gives
Yeah.
some discretion rather than trying to craft this into a 40-paragraph section to eliminate those edge cases. But I also agree that, to Brian's point, this is, and your point, that it's G is very vague.
Liz.
One, I feel like I'm taking the bar exam with all of this again. Two, it also doesn't really allay my thoughts from before about section D not being written in a way that really. So I think I'm in favor of providing this tax break in general to our senior citizens who are very important to Milton. The D concerns me because the having to be domiciled in owning a property for at least 10 consecutive years doesn't take into account my fear that people may have lived here for 30 years, contributed to the community, had to move away for 1 or 2 years for whatever reason, come back, and then the clock resets. And so particularly with our older community members, you could have to go live someplace for a year because of, you have to move in with your family because health concerns or whatever to help raise your grandchildren, something. And it resets just like that, even though you've been a contributor and a big part of the Milton community for so long. So if that's the intent, fine. But I would have liked to see a broader encapsulation of all of our senior citizens personally, but I'm not the select board, so.
Yeah, the idea of domicile is very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, so if you go live somewhere
Say Florida.
for health reasons or to help your mom out, what's your intention? You're going to always return to Massachusetts in your house in Milton?
Maybe.
So you never really leave
Maybe.
in the first place?
Maybe.
I would say no. I don't know.
Is domicile your primary residence, your driver's license?
Essentially, it's where you have the intention to.
And
It's
where
where
you pay
you.
your taxes.
Yeah, it's where you lay your head. I mean,
There are so many court cases about that, about your domicile, though.
yeah,
a
that's
little
why I
bit
said it's a
fuzzy.
very interesting
Very fuzzy.
concept, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, are we?
yeah. I mean, for one thing, are we moving on to this topic without having really? Have we settled the financial topic?
No, I was just called on Liz.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. So for
Yeah.
I think I suggested our last meeting changing the word "and" to the word "or," because it would not solve the case where someone moves away and sells their house and moves to Florida for 2 years and moves back. It wouldn't solve that case, but I don't think you're going to solve that case. What would that be? Somebody coming and saying, "Don't you remember I used to live here?" But if you have or, then if they move away for a year or two but continue owning this place, maybe they rent it out, then they move back. That would solve that. And it would also solve the issue of renters as well as other edge cases that I mentioned at our other meeting. We want renters to feel like equally valuable members of our community. And if someone rents and then buys a place and retires here. So I was suggesting changing "and" to "or." I'll throw that out to see what people think. Liz or others.
I'm not clear on why we would need to do that because we're not really concerned about renters, right? This is for property tax exemption.
Well, my thought was if someone rents here for a long time and then buys a house around when they retire, and you may say that may never happen and it may never happen, but that would be the idea. Or another example I gave last time was like clergy. If clergy is living in church-owned house until the day they retire, and then they buy a property in Milton to retire in. They did not own until they buy their retirement property in Milton. You know, again, edge cases.
Or you said Milton Academy teachers as
That
well.
was my third example. Milton Academy teachers living on campus and then buying a place.
Yeah.
And
I think the
I hate to
idea
be
is,
cruel, but I don't think they're entitled to live in the town. I mean, that really, I've always interpreted this as protecting homeowners who've owned a home in town and is now older, does not have the income to support the rising property tax rates.
I was gonna say, the Andrew's point is like, I think it's like you paid into the town for decades. Like you've paid in, you've written those checks. Now you've hit 65, now you're gonna get a break. Right, as opposed to paying a landlord all that money. And it's also obviously, I think to Andrew's point, to kind of help seniors stay in their home where they maybe raised a family or lived their whole life. But that's just my, Julia.
But I think to Jay's point, there's often a huge focus on homeowners in this town. And as a former renter myself, you know that your rent is what's being calculated into your rent are the owner's property taxes. So you are, in a way, paying into the town just like an owner would be. So I think to Jay's point, if you have lived here for whatever, we're going to say the requirement is 10 years, and in those last 2 years, you were able to buy a home, and you are 65 or older, I guess I like what Jay is proposing as a way of honoring those contributions to the town, even if you weren't. I mean, we all know homeownership is a privilege in so many ways. So to sort of penalize people who have lived here for an extended period of time and contributed to the town because they weren't able to afford to buy a home until later in life feels questionable to me.
You haven't paid as much in as a homeowner if you rent. You pay a fraction of what a homeowner pays in property tax.
How so? If your rent has been
So your
adjusted.
mortgage is $3,000 a month if you own the home. If you rent, you're paying $500 a month.
When I rented my property, I made sure that all of my mortgage and my taxes were covered by the rent I charged my renters.
Well, that's you. I'm just saying, just generally.
Well, I don't think anyone's renting their home at a loss.
Oh, no, certainly not. I'm just saying that you haven't paid as much into the town levy if you rent as opposed to owning.
But I'm not sure I agree with that statement. Because how have they not, if they are paying the landlord enough money to cover the landlord's mortgage and property taxes?
I'm just saying it's more of out of pocket, you. Like, what have you contributed to the town out of your own pocket as opposed to a landlord?
You've contributed the landlord's portion of taxes to the town.
Yeah, the landlords, but like what's coming, you know what I mean? I just think like, what's your investment into the town? I think if you own a home, you're just paying more.
Well, their investment in the town is whatever anyone else who's a homeowner invests in the town. They put their kids in the schools, they work in the businesses, they spend money in the town. So I don't think home ownership is the only measurement of what you can contribute to the town.
Well, yeah, I'm just talking.
No, and I don't think anybody's discounting that, but I think what the use case that I support is that this article helps long-term homeowners in the town stay in their homes and not get pushed out because of rising property values that all of a sudden makes what used to be affordable unaffordable. I mean, the unfortunate reality is that people on fixed incomes, regardless of whether property taxes are rising or not, may or may not get priced out of the homes that they grew up in because they can no longer support the taxes on their property without a salary. But what we can protect are situations where property taxes are rising 10% a year or whatever, and somebody that has owned their home for a long period of time finds themselves in a situation where they no longer can support that.
Liz is next.
So two things. I will note that the Massachusetts circuit breaker does include renters. So we are now choosing to take those people out. Again, not the select board. So that's an intentional decision that they're making to take the renters out. My concern with making it be, and again, is the fact that you could be a person who owns the property, has to move away, and then the Board of Assessors says you weren't domiciled here because you lived in Florida for 5 years. You still own the property. You grew up there. You lived there the whole entire time. You could be a person who didn't live here you had the property for 30 years, then you moved for a few years, then you came back and lived here 9 years. Sorry, doesn't cut it. Even though you have nearly 40 years of living in and contributing to Milton. If it were me, I'd change it to or, and then say that you have to live in Milton for 10 of the last 20 years or something like that, just to account for those people. Because I can also see a situation in which we're not giving the benefit to some of our senior citizens who could be priced out, but who have owned a home and contributed in that particular way. Now, I do think, to Julia's point, this is a decision that we just have to recognize is different than the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who also provides the circuit breaker to renters, making a note that they, deserve this tax break as well. Here we're saying no to that, only for homeowners. And that's a decision that we're making. So however people feel about that, fine. But it is ignoring that part of our community, for better or worse. But I would change it to, or I think the thing about that is if you say domicile or own a residential unit of property, it could just be someone who doesn't live in their property and is just, not like an Airbnb, but something to that effect, where you just, are kind of a landlord that lives someplace else and you're getting the benefit of it without living in the property. So I almost think that that's part of what they were trying to counteract. But I just feel like the language of D brings up so many questions about what the select board could be meaning and the intent that I'm not really sure where to go with that, because I don't know from them, what is your intent here? What are you trying to do? And we can think of a lot of ways to wiggle around it. And I think that, to Andrew's point, the language is a little vague.
Yeah, I agree with Andrew that I see the intent to keep folks who are older and on fixed income and dealing with increased cost, to keep them in their homes by giving them a small amount of tax break. And I see the renters issue for me is handled by the state with its circuit breaker, because it's giving back income that it takes in. We take in real estate taxes. If you're not paying real estate taxes, what do we got to give you? It's the state's taking care of that. It isn't the town of Milton's responsibility to hand renters a break at this point. I just don't see it. I think the purpose, and it'd be nice if I got first year, I'd like to know more about the sponsor of this. I'm assuming it was the select board who basically offered this. I also assume, it'd be good to find out, that this is offered before any override or additional taxes that are coming to soften the blow and essentially get some more votes from seniors who might otherwise say this would be the last straw for me and now I'm going to have to leave. Again, my suspicions is that's why that's here. And I think that's why that's the way it's written. And I'll open that up to this further discussion, but I think it's fairly straightforward.
Anybody?
And one of the things I could propose so that we don't go around in circles till 10 o'clock tonight is that we actually tighten up the language of this section. And then whether it's part of G or paragraph H, give the board some degree of discretion in an appeals process to make sure that we have not inadvertently excluded people that this is intended to support.
So right now, G is just to allow the Board of Assessors to deny applications. And I think what I'm hearing is to deny or actually override a failure to meet one of these qualifications. Is that what the proposal is?
Yeah, either leave in G, well, I guess the proposal is it close any of sort of the edge cases, leave in, maybe tighten up G and as an additional paragraph, allow the Board of Assessors to create an appeals process that the Board of Assessors can use to some degree to make sure that it follows the spirit of this. We're not excluding people from the spirit of the article.
I would just worry that that could create a burden on the Board of Assessors to review a lot of applicants who may think that they want to qualify but don't meet the requirements. I think the goal of setting out requirements is people should be able to clearly know either fall within this
That makes sense.
or I don't. I think there was a comment earlier to strike G. I actually like having some oversight because I worry that this is not a 2-year tax abatement. This is not 3 years. This is as long as you meet A through F and you own a property, we're giving you a sizable decrease in your property tax. We're also trying to be fiscally sound. I mean, property tax is vital for this town. So I would suggest we keep G. And maybe, hopefully, the Board of Assessors can share what that policy for approvals will be. I think maybe that would make us feel more comfortable, so it's not arbitrary. I can't imagine it would be arbitrary, but they haven't done it yet, so we'd have to trust that they will create rules that are rational and, make sense. But
Lori.
So a couple things. I wonder if the Board of Assessors has even seen this. And if they could comment on it. And Karen, has Judy jumped on by any chance? I would think she would jump in here if she.
She has not.
I feel like Judy has done a lot of
She has.
background work on this and would be beneficial to hear from her. I'm all set.
Liz.
I also had a note from when Mr. Milano came in that the idea with this would be go hand in hand with an override. And we talked about would it be more prudent to come after that override did or did not happen. And the thought was that we have to ask the legislature and the legislative approval might not come in time. I had a question if it could be written to have as a condition precedent that the override would happen, because otherwise we're kind of hamstringing ourselves to give this tax benefit without necessarily knowing that there will be an override that passes. So just based on the fact that Mr. Milano said that the idea would be that they would go hand in hand without knowing what's going to happen with that. 'Cause I can't predict the future. To have this be, yes, you're definitely going to get this tax benefit going forward, and not saying, provided that the town of Milton approves an override, to have that as a condition precedent, it wouldn't go hand in hand with an override otherwise, necessarily. So that was just one thing I wanted to bring up.
So would that be a proposed amendment to say the beginning of this bill to say subject to the override happening, blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what people wanted to do, that's just something that he mentioned. And I know that we're very focused on, I think that our senior citizens should get all the support they can. I do. But considering that we're very focused on the budget in this particular year, because he said the idea of the select board would be that it would go hand in hand with the override, where we don't know that the override will actually wind up being approved, it might make sense to have that language added. I'm just trying to think of all the things.
Tom?
Actually, Jay, you said $1,500 was the maximum at the circuit breaker, is that correct?
I mean, that's what I said, if you trust my quick overview of the
Yeah.
law.
So we're talking about between 750 and $1,500 is a tax break for people who are in the town who own property who now qualify for the circuit breaker. The percentage of those households, do we have any sense of what that might be?
Can I just get a clarification? We're talking about property taxes, and circuit breaker is sort of a guideline for income tax credits that is also happens to be used for property taxes or renters in certain cases. But in our case, we're just talking about property taxes, and there's no actual limit on what the credit can be other than 50% of some large value, right?
Yeah. Between 50 and, okay, you're right, Andrew, you're right. I stand corrected. It could be 50% of the tax itself,
Property taxes.
property tax.
So it could be
But
50% of a $30,000
there's
tax.
a,
No, you
there's
were
a-
right.
There was a limit, right.
You were right. It was 50% of the
Circuit breaker tax,
Yeah,
that's
that's what
right.
he said.
Sorry.
That's what Nick said.
Section 3 lays it out, Andrew.
That's right.
Oh, sorry.
I put that somewhere. So it's some sense
okay.
of how
So
much money we're talking about here
Maybe,
is probably in the same vein as the money we were talking about for the $60,000 approval. We could have lawyers change this, and I'm sure that we get the $60,000 very quickly.
I would love to hear from Judy.
Yeah.
She's going to be joining us.
Oh, is
Soon.
she? Oh, good.
Yeah, actually, Karen, can you keep an eye open?
Here she is.
11th hour.
She's here.
Hey, Judy, are you there?
You're on mute, Judy.
Okay. while we wait for Judy. Liz.
I found the number and answered his question. So there were 415 filers. So we anticipated that it would be between 140 to 200 people. Nick had said that at one meeting back on October 28th.
Liz, will you repeat that?
Yes. Nick had said on October 28th. Well, there are 450 people that could be applicable for them, but not everybody actually winds up applying.
Yeah.
So he said it was anticipated between 140 to 200 people. So I don't know. Multiply that by whatever we just talked about was 50% of the total you could get.
So my notes from when Nick was in said that the maximum credit was $27.30.
Mhm.
So I don't know how that correlates to the 1,500 from the state law. So that's a follow-up question.
What did you say, Lori? It was.
The maximum credit
Mhm.
was $27.30
For,
that Nick was
for
Nick
the
said.
credit for the circuit breaker with the, from an income standpoint?
No, from us, I think. And because we're doing 50% to start, hopefully, because that's not clear, it would be approximately 1,300 per
Yeah.
household.
So
Per
times that
property.
by,
Times 200 households?
yeah.
Yeah. 260.
So $250,000
And he had
a year.
used, I think, notes from another community. I don't remember if it was Haiti. Was it Haiti?
I know there's a few different cases.
I'm gonna try and relaunch. This audio is not working. See if Tom will let me go.
We think we can hear you now.
Judy, say hello.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. Ask Tom if he, or ask anyone if they can hear me through my computer.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I apologize to everyone about forgetting this meeting today. So this was a subject that I got really into. And just for the record, anyone new joining us from home, I did check in with the town hall to see if there was an ethics consideration due to the fact that I am a senior citizen in this town. However, it is determined that I am not eligible for either of the senior programs in our town, nor the state circuit breaker tax. So the housekeeping is now done. Done a lot of research on this program, and I did have an interview with Nick Connor one day, and we really hashed it out. And it stopped me because I can't see any of you. I just talking to a blank computer. There are two programs in town. So stop me if you've already heard of this. One has been on part of our bylaws for at least 12 years. And that is a work program. The cap of income is very low. It's around 48,000 per an individual, and most of the applicants to that program meet that. Don't obviously meet under the 48,000 a year, which again is a rather low number. It is run by the COA. It's administered by the COA. Applications go to the COA. You're required to work a certain amount of hours per year in a town department. You get a check for that $15 an hour. You get a pay stub, which takes out money that goes into the retirement fund, federal taxes, state taxes, and FICA, I guess, whatever else. And the actual, you get the stub, you get the pay stub. And explaining all of this, and the actual check goes to the town treasurer, and it's applied to your tax bill. So when you get it's like a payment. You get a regular tax bill. Your work off becomes part of your tax payment. So if you're just silly numbers, if your tax payment was $1,000 and you ended up with $500 from this work program, now you still owe the town $500 out of your own personal finances. Now this new thing, at first, to be honest, I was somewhat skeptical of it. And then the more I looked into it, I am okay with it. This new program, which is actually in other towns, and Nick Corner and Nick Milano have both gone to talk to people in person in other towns. This new program will be managed by the assessor's office. So you will apply and the assessors will determine. It will have a cutoff date. If you do not apply by, a certain date during the summer, so the assessors can go over how the tax bills are going to be put out every year. And if we're watching our tax bills, those of us in town and many other towns, I have come to find out, each year they are reassessing your property. And they are bringing that assessment up to just a hair under the 2.5%. So every year here in this town, we are reassessed, which brings us, as I said, up to the 2.5. And so every year we're paying more taxes because of this assessment plan that Milton, as well as other towns, do lately. So it's a never-ending cycle of increasing taxes. And now with some pretty major overrides on the horizon, whether they pass or not is another story for another day. But this program, you have to be eligible for the mass circuit breaker in order to apply for this program. There's no other way in. And so you have to turn in your taxes, your tax returns to show that you were, and I kind of like this aspect of the program that Nick are helping to put forth for our town, is that they're going to look at assets and they're not going to fine tune if you have, 20,000 down at, I don't know, what's a local bank? Citizens Bank. What they're looking for is how much other property you have, which basically indicates in a way, and I'm on board with this, looking for this type of assessment asset, is if you have a Cape anywhere, I know down the Cape, right? Everyone seems to have something down the Cape. If you have another property anywhere, either in the state or out of state, that somewhat implies that you, I do agree with this. Maybe you should, if you can't pay your taxes, maybe you should think about ditching your excess property, because this is a property relief for the property you have in town. So I am in agreement with that. I don't think you should have to bring in all your bank statements. to show that you have, $40,000 in some bank account. But that'll also show on your tax returns, right? In a way, because if you are getting, $1 million from your $1 billion investment account, then that would be showing up.
You wouldn't qualify. I'm sorry to interrupt.
You wouldn't have qualified for the senior tax
From the state, if that was
from the
case.
state. So that's again when the issue of assets was brought up, and there was some concern, and rightly so, that you could have a lot of money in investments and be using this to sort of reduce your tax bill. But a lot of these figures are going to show up through your tax returns. So there are two different programs. One will automatically reduce your taxes via your eligibility through the state. The other you must work for. The assessed value of a property using the state circuit breaker is $1,172,000. And in this town, that's not a hard number to reach, considering our property values. So being a senior myself, and that being my peer group, and engaging with my peer group down at the senior center, I can honestly say that there are people that would meet this criteria. They're living in a home that they bought, I don't know, let's just say in the 70s, and suddenly now they're sitting in a home that's worth over $1 million through no fault of their own. It's just the way the market has rolled. And so in a way, they've become house poor again, is how I speak about it in my peer group. They're holding on to they're in an asset that is, two commas in it, yet that their income can barely, their taxes are based on that asset. And so, whereas a senior could, we all pay the same price for bananas down at the store. But this would give some relief to this this unintended consequence of having a property that is just outrageously assessed.
Judy.
Like all of our properties.
Judy.
Now, I think the numbers are going to be low because you cannot be a renter, whereas the state circuit breaker takes in renters, and that may be as getting relief on the circuit breaker. So this is truly for property owners. And Nick and I talked a lot about seniors staying in their homes and not going to, an age-restricted community property. And it was a good conversation. And I said, seniors, sometimes are just reluctant to go into a new environment, a new living environment, whether it be good for them or not. And I use it. We know where the light switches are in the dark where we are. We're just familiar with our homes. And many seniors just want to ride it out for as long as they can in this setting that they're familiar with.
Hey, Judy, this is Tom. Could I ask you a question?
Yeah, oh, please, because I seem to be rambling now.
Judy, what do you think of the section G that
can't
gives the
see it
Board of
anymore.
Assessors
Can
some
you say it to me?
oversight over this whole process? What's your opinion given the work you've done on this?
I can't see it because I don't know why my computer screws up. Oops, sorry. Messes up all the time. I can't see it. Say it to me. The oversight is being done by the assessor's office, right?
Yes.
they approve the application. They can deny the application if they find the applicant has excessive assets or places them outside of the intended recipients of the exemption. Like, what do you feel about that oversight provision of the assessors? Kind
I
of
feel
adding
again,
to this.
Right. I feel again that I don't know, and I did not go over this a lot with Nick Connor because he and Nick Milano went to Wakefield and had a long meeting with the assessors department out there and how the assessors would do this. From what I understand, this is when you fill out the application, you have to indicate whether you have other property. Now, could someone not tell the truth? I don't know how they would do that. I did not ask that question, Tom. Are you voting tonight?
Maybe Judy, but Brian had his hand up.
Okay,
Brian.
Yes.
I'm listening.
Thanks. I'm gonna repeat what I said before, which is something I don't want to do, but it makes me even more believing of this now. Like, if you have millions of dollars in assets somewhere, you're not going to qualify because you're going to be taking income from those assets. So you'll never qualify for the circuit breaker to begin with, in all likelihood. If you have a second house on the Cape and you're making, hardly any money, you probably can't afford the taxes on both houses to begin with. And you probably would sell it, is my suspicion. But good for you if you can keep both on a really low income. Because you're going to be paying at least $20,000 to $30,000 a year in taxes. I think we're overcomplicating this. And I think we should just stick with the states. That whole G even makes me more convinced we're overcomplicating it. And we should just stick with the states' law. And if you qualify, we'll give you the credit. Because I think we're adding stuff that's just going to be waste of time it's not going to mean anything in the end, my opinion.
Brian, could I respond?
Yes.
Until 2023, I had assets out of the state in property. You would never know that from my state income tax, most likely. Those assets no longer are with me. They have been disposed of. But that wouldn't show up, I don't believe, on my state
It won't.
taxes.
No.
Because how would it?
But you had to pay, I assume you paid property taxes on that.
Right. I pay them to the state of Arizona.
Yeah. And I don't know why, but eventually you sold it. But
Well, I did.
yeah.
But I don't recall anything I did out there transferring over to my state taxes. I could be wrong, but
You're right.
and unless you knew, like there were people, in the town that knew, oh, I'm heading to Arizona. So I mean, it was no big secret. I mean, it wasn't in the Milton Times, but it wasn't anything I tried to hide that I had this, what you would call asset. So I understand people's trepidation here about assets that can't be found. I mean, it's a normal thing, I think, to worry about if we're giving money to somebody that's hiding money somewhere. It's just human nature. However, how many people are going to do that? Maybe one gets through the cracks. I think that can happen when you file your taxes. I think it can happen when you apply for anything. You could conveniently leave out information that, I don't know. I think I'm going to believe that people that apply for this circuit breaker are being honest when they go to the town. And because now remember, you're face to face in a way with the assessor's office. And I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but I believe that we're not going to find a whole lot of fraud in this program because once again, we live in town and word gets out. Oh, where are you going, Brian? Oh, I'm heading to the Cape this weekend. And then somehow or other, I don't know, in casual conversation, even, you may let it out that you get a tax break here when everyone's going nuts, when the overrides take place, and now their taxes are going up way more than 2.5%. And the year after the override takes effect, you can count on being reassessed again because it's the new way of towns getting money when they're having troubles with overrides.
Thank you, Judy. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to say? Liz, yeah,
Very
please.
briefly.
Thank you, Judy.
While we were thinking of the amount of money that this would cost, I reminded myself, looking back in my notes, that this is a tax burden shift and I don't have it open anymore, but oh yeah, I do. Section 5 provides that nothing will be granted. Each year, nothing will be granted until the Department of Revenue certifies the amount and that amount is covered by the burden shift. So it's not coming out of the town's budget per se. Everybody that owns property is going to pay. And if it can't cover it, it doesn't happen. So I forgot about that until I reread it. Thank you. Or I knew about it, but yeah.
Jay?
Yeah, and
Yeah, please.
following up on that, I did some quick back of the envelope math. The burden's going to be shifted to everybody else. So let's say 100 seniors get it, and let's say they get the maximum amount of $1,500 each. That's $150,000. That's, we collect about $100 million in taxes every year, so that's about 0.15%. With numbers that small, you can just add them up to the average homeowner and what they pay. And I think if 100 seniors sign up and get the maximum benefit, the average homeowner will pay an extra $18 per year, which I think is what I spent on lunch today. So.
Yeah, Nick said it would be at most like $30 per person.
Oh, he already said that? Okay. Well,
That's about how much I spend on dinner. So.
yeah, it's pouring a bucket into Turner's Pond and seeing how the level changes. It doesn't.
But it still increases the taxes for the majority
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the benefit of a minority.
Yep.
So I think we should acknowledge that, and it's for a good cause. But
Yeah.
we're talking about increased taxes anyway, so I wouldn't. It's not a huge amount, but I wouldn't say it's meaningless. There could be families that $30 could be something they don't want to pay.
And those tend to build
Right,
on each other.
$30 here or $50 here.
But good point.
Tom, I can't regulate my audio. I would like to concur with that. Any raise in anyone's taxes, it just compounds. Although this won't, each year it'll be a different number, dependent on how many people apply and how much percentage of the 2730 the select board is going to authorize, whether it be 50%, 60%, 100%. And every year, and that's why there's a deadline for this program into the assessor's office, because they have to computate how everyone's taxes will be impacted by the amount that's going to go to this bylaw, this program. So every year it's going to be different. If it's $30 per, total property taxes minus the applicants to this program, but it could be $30 this year, It could be $15 the year after. Every year, it's going to change based on the number of applicants and the percentage of the 2730 the select board is going to allow. Thank you.
That makes sense.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, I think we have some ideas. I think we've talked it through. I know there might be a question or two outstanding, but anybody want to vocalize what they'd like to see happen with this? Anybody have any thoughts about the article as it stands, changes, anything?
I think Jay agrees, but I don't know how to do this, but would I make a motion? I would strike Article G and may just make it the same as the state law. That would be my recommendation.
Are we taking, so I think the Board of Assessors or somebody ought to have some control over voting up or down on an application. If we take G out, is there any other place where that happens? I don't see it.
I don't believe so.
No, I think there has to be oversight by somebody in the town because we're dealing with town assets. I think the Board of Assessors makes sense. What the language is going to be, I believe, to others, but somebody's got to take a look at these applications and either go thumbs up or thumbs down.
Andrew has his hand up.
Andrew?
I am in favor of having some oversight to this program.
Andrew?
Yeah, if we're not changing, tightening up the language in section 2, then I would prefer to leave it as is with G in place.
Would we vote on this proposed amendment?
Chair.
Yeah. Jay, how would we like to do it? Jay made a suggestion.
I mean, I don't want to step
No,
on
no,
it. I mean,
tell us.
One thing is someone at the warrant committee could propose we adopt this unchanged, and then we could move to an amendment and vote on that amendment. That's certainly one way to do it.
Do you have a comment first before the motion?
More of a question, yeah. I mean, I feel like there have been a number of different issues raised in different pieces of this article as written. So would it, and I don't know if this is proper procedure, but could we go through and vote on different potential changes before we then vote on the final version of it?
Never done it that way before.
I'm really, if we're not voting for how it's written now, then I'm unclear how we get to, what we are voting on that incorporates or doesn't all of the various potential changes that have been proposed tonight.
I mean, that's how it works on the floor of town meeting. You know, you bring up the full article, and then somebody says, I want to amend it in this way. The group votes yes or no. I want to amend it in this other way. Group votes yes or no. And then once those amendments are done, you vote on the final thing as amended.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'd love to have a follow-up conversation with Nick and with the Board of Assessors. But if you want to vote, I'd probably vote the way they wrote it because they've done their homework and vote it as it is.
A thought process, if we vote on changing anything, doesn't it have to be redone by the select board? I'm confused. Help me out.
You would vote to recommend the town approve the article with possible changes to whatever the changes are. That's what your vote would say, and then you'd explain your reason for changing in your comment. And probably done the way Jay would say, someone would move to approve the article and then someone would move to amend.
Yeah. So in that case, what's printed in light font in the warrant would be slightly different than what's printed in bold font, what's in the warrant. And what's in bold would go to town meeting as town meeting's starting point of discussion. And hopefully between now and then, we would talk with the select board, and the select board would agree with us, and it would all go smoothly. Or maybe the select board would convince us why we're wrong, and we would still all agree, and that would still go smoothly.
Julia.
I think I'm in agreement with Lori that there was a lot I heard a lot tonight of, we don't know what the intention was. So would it be helpful to get more clarification on some of these, some of this language from the people who were involved in writing it and or the people who are going to potentially be charged with enforcing it or approving applications before we start messing with the language ourselves.
I think that might be a good idea. Liz?
Well, I had hoped that we would have had some information about at least these highlighted things. And since we don't, would it be appropriate for you to email Mr. Milano, maybe other people, I don't know, but at least Mr. Milano, and say, these are the 3 things that we still don't, or 5 or 10, however many things that we still don't have clarity about. And if he could sort of explain to us, or someone in the select board, I don't know, what the intent was.
Sure.
Because I think that if it's between vote no and this does not happen, or accept it the way that it is, okay, then you can vote based on that. But if we have the opportunity to strengthen some of the language, get rid of some of the vagueness, and the select board can say, no, that's not what we wanted to do, that's fine. But if it's something that hasn't been considered, maybe it can be considered. I do trust that, they wrote this and thought about all the contingencies and whatever, but if we're having these questions, then everybody on the floor of town meeting is going to have a lot of these questions. And so I think to the extent that we can answer those questions in advance through some back and forth discussions with the select board or Mr. Milano, I think that would save everybody time at town meeting and kind of answer a lot of those questions in advance. I think that would be good.
Sure.
I agree with Lori, was my long-winded way of saying.
How are people feeling about that, Ron? I mean, I'm getting the feeling that people aren't comfortable. There's a lot of questions, and there's language questions and intention. Jay?
I'll play devil's advocate. I mean, sure, it's hard to argue against, let's spend more time and get more information, but just play devil's advocate. When Mr. Milano was in here, I think I'm quoting him and saying, well, we saw the wording that worked at other towns, and this is the wording that worked at other towns. So I don't know if we're going to get more than that. And I know we're sort of talking about the process, but to talk about one of the subjects that we're actually talking about, the select board last year looked at a historic district and decided that the language sort of wasn't fully baked enough. And one reason was because it was sort of vague as to who was going to do what and how are they going to enforce it and what were they going to enforce. And when I read G right here, what I read is trust the Board of Assessors to do the right thing. And I do trust the Board of Assessors, but I'd rather not put that in law. I don't like just saying, well, the Board of Assessors has the final say. I don't feel comfortable with that. And so, yeah, if it's going to be this language, if it's going to be include G or strike out G, I mean, we've just talked, and some people want an oversight, and some people don't. And okay, I've said my piece. So
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. Steve?
Yes, thank you. I agree. It seems like some more information needs to be had here. Listening to the commentary, it's a lot of questions. It was a lot for me to take in. I guess pretty much dominated by lawyers on our board here, but there's a lot of information coming at it. But I mean, there's a lot of questions I have too, and I honestly I have a problem with just moving forward saying, well, it's only X amount of dollars more, considering we're looking at how our real estate taxes keep climbing, and that's been articulated earlier. And I think at some point we need to take a mature look at it and figure out how are we going to ask these questions, because this is going to be an added burden to the taxpayers on top of what's coming down the pike, right? And there's not a whole lot of commercial property out there to offset all this. So I mean, I think it'd be great to ask more questions. I appreciate the members who asked for more time and more insights on this. I think it would be helpful for me as well.
Steve and Tom, perhaps, I think Nick Connor is the person at our town hall that is 100% involved in this. And again, they went and talked to the assessors department in Wakefield because they apparently help another smaller town. I kind of lost that part of the conversation, but they are paying attention to how other towns run this through their assessor department. So I don't know, just an idea.
Okay.
If Nick Connor could come in. Not that Nick Milano doesn't know this, but
Well, thanks, Judy. So my feeling is we got to bring some more people in. Julie, is that fair? Okay. It may not be till the beginning of next week, and we're good with that.
Meaning we
Yeah.
don't have a recommendation in the warrant going to print.
It would be in the warrant.
Would or would not.
It would.
Because it's the end of next week.
If they come in, if they can't come in, we just vote, I guess.
Yeah, we'll have to address it
Yeah.
the next couple of nights. But the warrant's not, the draft isn't due for a little while now. We still have some time.
I thought it was going to print the 28th.
No, we said the week of the 28th, which really starts on the 27th. Just that week.
So do we have that full week?
And he probably has a little buffer.
There was a little wiggle room,
Yeah,
is my
there is,
understanding.
but, you know, we don't want to.
Right, we don't want to wait.
But I mean, we could hear from Nick. You know, we could hear tomorrow. We're gonna have town council in. I can see if maybe Nick can put something together for us for Thursday, but that's also schools. But we could carve out a teeny bit of time to have maybe Nick and Mr. Collins come in if they can. Addresses, maybe even Mr. Milano could come in tomorrow.
Thursday, you mean 2 days from now? Thursday?
Yes.
I think if
Tomorrow's-
you email them these questions, maybe that could target
Yeah.
the discussion, so we're not talking through all the history.
Yeah. So I can do that.
Yeah, even if you can zoom in as opposed to.
Yeah, so I'll reach out to him and I'll see what he can do for us, just to answer some of these questions. The highlighted language, G, renters, you know, approximate cost per taxpayer per year.
Andrew's point of one or more taxpayers who.
Mhm. The or, I like
Well, the
Ron's
or.
or.
No, that doesn't.
Andrew had the one or more taxpayers who. Did each of them have to be? I
The
think
elderly
not.
parent with the wealthy 61-year-old child
Yes.
living with them.
They could be siblings.
They're all over.
We can
Yeah.
own property with anybody.
Telling you, give me one of
I think
those.
the time frame too, doing like a 5 of 10 years could be more forgiving than 10 consecutive years. I mean,
Yeah.
that's another one I think.
10
Yeah.
of 20, whatever
Yes,
number.
15.
Okay.
And there's a difference between this state says 1,500 is the total credit. But I wrote down that he had said the maximum credit was 2,730. So we should figure out.
Do you want us to
Ask
email
him.
you?
Well, I
those?
will, but I didn't know if anybody, I didn't know if I since you were.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure, Steve.
Hey, sorry. And I didn't see this on there. If I missed it, I apologize. Does a taxpayer have to apply for this every year, or are they locked into this for as long until it gets reviewed? Is there an expiry on this? Is it 12 months? Is it more?
It is a 1-year program, Steve. Each year you need to reapply,
Gotcha.
because each year you do taxes. And
Yeah.
maybe there's 1 year that you do not qualify for the circuit breaker. And then the next year you do. I don't know how that would work out at the state level. And so each year, and also you have to get your taxes done on time to apply for this.
Yeah.
There's no extensions. And to Liz's comment about, yes, we can own property with anyone we want when we age. However, I wonder how, and we should put that down as a question, because say, well, you could own property with your spouse, because then the circuit breaker is based on income tax filing. But if I own, here's a good question I didn't think of. If I owned a property with Liz, I put her on the deed to my house.
Thank you.
We have no financial connections at all via state income taxes, right? I wonder how that would work. That I think.
Correct.
I think in an odd, strange way, because in estate planning, which is a good financial advisor will advise any, if you're a good one, not to put your children on the deed to your house. It creates a problem along the way, which I'm not going to go into. However, I wonder how that works. That's so in a way, in
Could
an
ask Nick, I
unintended
think.
way. Here's an odd thing.
Well, if you have rental income, obviously it shows up on your tax returns. But if you are declaring assets or there's some sort of measure of assets, the value ascribed to you is your ownership percentage. So if you and I owned $1 million property together, we own $500,000 of property in Milton.
Right, and each of us would be, well, if we rented it, each of us would be liable, and now we're depreciating. It gets complicated, doesn't it? when
Well,
you really start going down
why
the road?
that's why I find the language problematic, that it is not very clear on whether it's one, multiple people, and how many people. How it should be clearly spelled out that.
I think if you
of-
go to the Mass DOR and look up circuit breaker, you can click on an application, an actual schedule that you have to fill out that goes with your taxes. Schedule, whatever. And because I did look at it, and there is a provision there about trusts. If you own the trust, if your house is in trust, you have to be, the trustee or it's complicated, and you have to fill out this whole application it's like schedule, I don't know, I forget what it's called. It's not here on this note, it's on the pile of notes somewhere else. And so they do provide for if your house is in trust.
Okay.
But you could be any age to have your house in trust. This just is applying to seniors because of the nature of this tax break.
Is there anyone else? Okay.
It can't be in a trust that you can't.
Okay. Hey, Judy,
Yeah.
we're going to, I appreciate the comments. And I'd ask that just everyone here, I'm going to give Nick as many questions that I have. Please recall what you want to ask and what you want to know. We're going to get one shot at this. Okay, we got to vote. We got to write a comment. I think just at this point, I will get that information forward. We have liquor license tomorrow. We can always talk about this more tomorrow. Okay, everything's on the agenda, but we have town council coming in, try to deal with the licenses, the articles concerning the liquor provisions. We can always go back if we have energy to discuss more. And then we have schools, and I'll be able to work something out, I'm sure, with the town administrator to come in and address this more. I'm just trying to be cognizant of the time in our next several weeks. Liz?
Do you want us to email you the questions?
It would
I
be
feel like
really
you have
nice if you could. I just collect them and I just put them to Nick like I did the liquor questions. It would be nice, or just make sure you ask him when he's here in the room. But I don't know. I'm kind of thinking we're kind of tapped for the night. I'm going to be signing some comments tomorrow. Just moving forward, we're just going to kind of need some help in getting these all together in just the last minute. We can talk about that tomorrow. I'd like to maybe get some first-year people, some second-year people. If there's a third-year person who wants to write one on their own, that's fine. But I just like some of the newer people to be more involved. Jay volunteered me for a comment my first year.
That was nice of me.
It was very nice of you. And, it was stressful. We had a very short town meeting, but it was an excellent process. And, I really took the time to figure out how to do them. And I was much better positioned to help the chair during the regular town meeting. Lori helped out and a bunch of other people, and be a good thing. So we can talk about a little bit more of that tomorrow, but please email me your comments about this. Anything else for Mr. Milano that pertains to this tomorrow, liquor, and anything else we want to discuss, and then schools on Thursday, and hopefully maybe Nick in to discuss more about the circuit breaker. Anyone have anything else they'd like to add? Liz?
Do you have a sense of next week's schedule?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Can I phrase that a different way? What's your vision for what we will have voted on by the end of the day on Thursday?
I think we have voted on everything but this.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Everything that we've seen.
Yeah, everything that we've seen.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So not
I think this, there's parts of this I like. I think everyone's raised like really good points, about this. The assessors, all that stuff. So I don't know. I'm hopeful.
Inside baseball, I guess, as a first year. Are all votes unanimous, or is there everybody duke it out? And we come up with a number?
We make the rookies present.
Yeah. No, you know what? I've been a part. I'd say a lot of them are unanimous. A lot are unanimous, but I mean, there's always one or two.
Right.
Every warrant, right? That stirs up more than just financial concern.
Right. They're always presented as the Warrant Committee, and that means that the majority of the Warrant Committee has voted yes.
Yeah, and I think too, we've had to make some tough votes in the past, my time here, and I've seen it in the past, but we're a committee. I think there's an understanding too, and I think this is a big thing about the comments, okay? And I try to do this, and I think it's really important that you really illustrate what was discussed. The winner writes the comment, right? They write the history.
They write history.
But I think that it's more appropriate that we do give the other side of the coin. What was discussed? What were the issues brought up? A lot of times it's silent to that, but I think it's important for the town meeting to know what we talked about, and that there are always differing opinions on this board. We all stand together as a committee on our vote, and that's what we are. But, we're all different people and all individuals, and there's a lot more on the table. So I think it's important to tell the town, like, this is what we talked about. And while we may have not all agreed on those things, and, you know, here are a couple of great points that were made that we discussed, that, you know, I don't know. I don't really know what my final point is, but just that, you know, we vote as a committee. But in terms of the comments, I think it's better if we kind of balance it a little bit and just give some insight to the town on, you know, what we discussed, and that we do have differing opinions.
Okay. Great.
Is there a motion? Oh, Lori, do you have any more comments or
Yeah,
concerns?
no, I just would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Seconded by Julie. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.